I'm not sure at what point I got this book. Some of the Shiat Creed. Abdullah Ibn Mouhammad Alsalafi. Oh, Alsalafi. Wrong S. But I've been reading it once a year since 2000. It's over a decade. I don't remember what year exactly. Was it 2003? And Tawheed or Sufism was another book that I've been reading every year. But let me say something about this book. And one thing that is apparent is that this book is sort of the worst things that Sunnis, the worst things that Shias have ever said. And by the time I read this book, I read thousands of narrations from the Sunnis and the conclusions of various scholars and stuff like that. So one of the things that came through with the whole thing was, I've seen worse and a lot more of this, and they can't even finish this book without making some of the points. But the narrations, the differences and the conflicts are generally scholarly, political, personal issues rather than actual differences in narrations. And something that the Shia and Sunni agree upon is, as far as the historical narratives that are accepted in those traditions, no matter how common or uncommon they are known, is that the true rejectors were the people who exaggerated the status of Ali, Abdul Basir, and probably the rest of those that were close to Muhammad. And we saw how after Muhammad died, except for Ali, it was common enough for the people to look upon the leader of the state and say, oh, best of us and the son of the best of us. And it's like Muhammad just wanted people to talk to him as a human being, and he corrected people very regularly, but there wasn't as much correction done. I guess there wasn't, But anyway, so it's of the worst things said about them. The disbelievers are the enemies of Ali and enemies of other individuals like that. And the believers are, of course, the party of. So the terms existed. But when we're going to talk about a sect, or religious group, looking at their own text to condemn them or support them. And my channel is not about all, ooh, they're bad, this, that, and the other. So I may end up interviewing some people that obviously I don't, well, I don't think anybody I would agree with them on every point, but so it's 1441 right now. And it's the 4th. So, if you can find an origin to the Sunni, you're going to have to say it was after the historical origin of the Shia. But Abdullah ibn Saba, or is it Saba, the Jew from Hira, said he was Muslim. A lot of people are going to say they're Muslim and then are going to worship something other than God, or they're going to accept their, start making claims that would question their Islamic status, or they might not do things that would qualify them as Muslim. So, but wasn't this somebody who Ali had to deal with? according to the Shia, that Ali had to deal with people that were treating him like a god or even a prophet. He just didn't want anything to do with that. Maybe in the English sense, he would have been okay with the word prophet, but not as a Nabiullah, Rasulullah. And the Sunni insult of calling the Zaydiya rejectors after joining Zayd ibn Ali. Oh, some people came to the 12 Imams. So the 12 Imams, or the 7, or the 5, or the 6, or whatever number that have been accepted in your personal looking. A lot of what is said about them, and you're going to find out later that these things that are said about them aren't, always in support of this thing. I'm bringing a tafsir that does make the point. It does sound like, okay, this wasn't written by, the beating and the cutting and the burning and the piercing and the bewailing the dead and stuff like this. Was this stuff done by the Imams themselves? No. It's derivative. So, okay, how many sects? Some people are going to say, oh, well, there's the Sunnis and then there's the sects. So the 72 sects that are not quite fully Islamic would obviously be the ones where there'd be a title. If you're a Muslim who refers to the Quran and the teachings of Muhammad, well, okay, whatever linguistic title, Shia, Ahl Sunnah, Ahl Hadith, these are all terms that were used by the Prophet, but they weren't supposed to, well, I'm a believer. There was that instant going on during his life. He's like, don't even be calling yourself a believer to go around distinguishing yourself. So over 700 of them. Yeah. Some of the names have gone and came, but the types, you do find the same types of people, whether deviant or accepting. 72 psychological types. It's not an uncommon model, although it would be more common if people were as interested in the subject. So one of the things is the Shia, they do not have all 10 dialects of the Quran, but they believe in them. They have 7 among themselves, and they look at their own compilations of commentaries and stuff like that. So there are people, it's a minority, who try to say that the Quran was changed or some other thing like that. Well, the way people take it, people read into things that they're not there, and, so the different sects have tried to read into things what they're not. And the idea that the Quran is created, well, as the speech of God. If the speech of God is the things that God has done in creating the universe and the sent one, the exemplar prophets, messiahs, various, okay, if they're the word, then they're uncreated and co-eternal with God. So we really can't follow this. The word is eternal thing. So it's the speech of God. Everybody, every Muslim agrees that it's God's revealed word. So, whatever. And Ali did have his own comments. Other people had their own comments. Ibn Masud had their own comments. It's not to say that other people didn't have the Quran. And some sayings would have meant that the people aren't upholding it as it should be. It's not that they've taken things from the Quran and left them out. It's they've left them out in their own lives. So, and the living Quran. One of the things about the 12 Imams was they were trying to follow the prophetic example of being able to directly take the inspiration and the revelation and... Okay, I should have something visual on the screen. And follow that for themselves. And how can we deny that there were some mistakes? And there were even people who left Islam. The Sunni narrators prove that. So, but this hatred for the early leaders that didn't go over to that side, Ali himself, as I pointed out, is it Najib Balagha saying 188 says that, Ali didn't, because he knew the Prophet, because he was related to the Prophet, he didn't want any support of this. We can say the best 3 generations. But it's not entirely about creed in all the groups. As I say, there are extreme groups. There are a lot of Shia who aren't Muslim. But let's not pretend. And let's, the delaying of the prayer and unnecessary combining the prayers and for some prophets, the best of the people were always the people that they were among. Some prophets, it was the opposite. They didn't become the best of people, and there were always some bad people amongst them. And sometimes there was a mix. So saying, well, they're like the Jews, and they say, well, the people with Moses kind of messed up, and so some of the as I'm saying, a lot of the first, the Quran, it's pretty solid. Everybody agrees. All 500 years of initial writings, you can check it out, and to the very letter, you have this, different dialects, Sin, Sad, Nun, Mim, that sort of thing. But it's, the same word, different dialect. You have the exact same words, exact same order. It's exact same text, really. But the strength as time went on of what people recorded, what people said about Muhammad, strongest people said about the first generations, what people said about the Imams, and then it got worse in terms of the Sufi sheikhs. But let's be honest, even the Sufi sheikhs, their teachings were regarded in a way that is stronger and more preserving than one would expect of other religions, their scriptures and their or even modern history. And the idea, there are some people who Aisha is not, is vindicated in Quran. The rumors weren't true. Nobody ever witnessed things. People just passed rumors, and it became clear later on. So the idea that the return is that, yes, the righteous people may be resurrected first, but but people are going to be judged. It's not that they're going to resurrect someone from the dead to punish them for crimes that they've committed, and then then they're going to be laid back down, and then everyone's going to be dead, and then there's going to be the resurrection of everybody in the judgment. There's no. Another aspect that we could look at is tukya or tawkya. So having regard. Islam, according to the Quran, does not blame the people who were tortured and threatened into saying or doing things that are not right, as long as it has not entered into their heart. Always acting in regard, not feeling like you have to instantly throw in, oh, I'm a Muslim. Just like some people, well, a good Christian. People will try to cheat you before saying that sort of thing. You get really suspicious by now. But no. So having regard for the situation. And praying on earth is an important thing that Islam has allowed. Is it required that everything's material and earthy that you're going to pray on, but some people will not pray on unnatural material, or they'll bring something with them, and you can say it's excessive, but saying it's wrong, no. Now, the Shia and the first generations were not Sunni. It didn't really exist as a sect or something back then. It didn't really exist. Everybody was the tradition, the tradition that Muhammad brought or lived. Everybody was trying to live that. Ali and the Imams got along with the first generations. So it wasn't about dividing the community. And so this thing about the creed regarding the Sunnis, the Sunni Shia split in particular has left a lot of exaggerations on both sides. Let's not pretend. The enjoyment marriage that was allowed until certain things in the Quran were laid down. A lot of that's carried on. And some of it is done by Sunnis. Sunni majority countries, even Sunni ruled countries, are practicing that temporary marriage thing. Guarding one's private parts. Of course, your tailor or your doctor, or if you've hired a servant or something like that, your modesty. But it's not something where you can go having sex with your slaves. That's not part of it. Without marriage. And it's not saying that you certainly can't force your slaves or anything like that. Well, it's not lawful in Islam. That's the point. But temporary marriage was something that was part of a lot of traditions, Jewish, Greek, whatever. So it was something practiced. But Islam, there's conditions about marriage that kind of make that impossible. And making extra sacred places like Najaf and Karbala, or that's it's exaggerated. Going places, learning about history, that is an Islamic thing, but worshiping the beings at the grave or saying prayers on top of the grave, making it into a pilgrimage. The biggest pilgrimages in Islam are Arba'een and Muharram, but that's not really Islam. So Hajj is a smaller pilgrimage. Although you can say Umrah, the lesser pilgrimage, is greater in terms of a year. But as far as single day events, and claiming that God learns, that's not part of Islam. God does not, is not lacking in anything. And some attributes, people take it to, physical, that sort of thing. Ashura means something different. It's about saving Moses. It was never about what was going to happen. But this is something that arrived later. Allegiance. Now, let's stop arguing about what happened politically in the past. And let's have, let's get along with living leaders, not, there's going to be a great Mahdi at the end of times, and therefore we're aligned to him. And those in authority over us, if we're going to obey them as long as it agrees with the revelation and the inspiration, that is a different matter than But honestly, the 5 pillars are the same. The Quran is the same. Other teachings are the same. Some people may be innocent of the people in some regard, and generally an innocent person, but the idea that the prophets or anybody else was incapable of making a mistake, that's not something they've said. Let's remember the humanness of these individuals. And there are some things, let's not go too far in cursing. Let's look at the truth about certain individuals. Saying that people are damned, some of it is, did such and such die as a disbeliever, did they not? There are some disputes in the historical claims. If we were to say the twain idols of the Quraysh But now, the support of hypocrisy and the evil and the ignorance, yes, be against that. But let's be careful of our socialization, who we socialize with. Let's be careful of where certain beliefs come from. And yeah, definitely be careful of curses and prejudging people.